Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Brian Van Hook, and I'm with the Florida Small Business Development Center at FIU. Hope you're having a good Tuesday. We'd like to welcome you to this webinar that's focused on the engagement strategies for today's workforce. We really are thankful to have Suzanne from the Chaplain School Hospitality Executive Education. We're going to get a really great presentation for you on retention, on engagement strategies for your workforce, which is important in any industry, but especially hospitality, food, tourism. And before we get started, I did want to please encourage you to let us know who you are in the chat. Let us know about your business. Let us know where you're from. Don't be shy if you have any questions. We want really tough questions for Suzanne, for us. And if there's any questions we can answer during the presentation, we will. But definitely put them in the chat. You can use the Q&A section as well. And then before we turn it over to Suzanne, I would like to tell you a little bit about BizGap. By now, a lot of you guys have been in multiple webinars or events. I've seen a lot of you have been in 5, 10. Somebody's been in 26 of our training events since we started the program. And just want to thank you for being engaged and participating in these events. We had really great feedback and turnout. And the BizGap program is funded through a grant from the U.S. Small Business Administration. It is focused on Florida's 27th Congressional District, which ranges all the way from downtown Miami, Little Havana, Coral Gables, over to Key Biscayne, then down to Kendall, Westchester, and Palmetto Bay, Cutler Bay. And we're focused on assisting businesses in that particular district. And based on the canvassing and the work in the district, we did find there's a heavy retail, hospitality, tourism focus. So we were very glad to partner with the Chaplain School on this webinar series, and we've had webinars every Tuesday since October. So we're kind of in the home stretch at the end of the year. So I want to thank Suzanne and her team and the professors for that. And would just encourage you, if we can assist you in any way under BizGap or SBDC, please reach out to myself or Gabby. I know you're getting the emails from Gabby on upcoming events. And with that, we'll just encourage you again, put in the chat who you are. We want this to be interactive. We want to be engaged with you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Suzanne for this really great presentation. Thanks again, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. Welcome, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be with you all today. As Brian had mentioned, I am at the Chaplain School of Hospitality and Tourism Management with FIU. And one of the fun aspects that I have the opportunity to work on is executive education. And I also serve as the director of our new hospitality executive education. So I've got a QR code up there. You are welcome to explore our page and our offerings. We've got some great programs that are coming up where we have the opportunity to help you as industry leaders focus on refining your skills and leveling up your knowledge so that you can better support your guests in any type of experience that's happening. So as we jump into today's presentation, I want to give a little context to our market so we have a better understanding as to why what I'm talking about becomes so important. And the first thing we will take a look at is our unemployment rates. And so I do date back to 2019, and I think it's relative because 2020 was such an anomaly in our economic forefront. And so we really look at having had a stable unemployment pre-pandemic in 2019. And then if you look at where we had the impact for COVID, we really saw very high numbers that really started to rise. We clearly started to go down in our recovery period from 21 to 23. And now in our current trend, we, as the state of Florida, are sitting at about a 2.7%. And so we have a very strong labor market in comparatively speaking to the United States. So great form of business opportunity happening here. I want to also take a look at, from a hospitality perspective, looking at what is the average salary in Florida. Now, this is just the hospitality industry. And so we're sitting roughly at about $43,000. Interestingly, I did a presentation similar to this about 2 years ago using data from 2022. And at that point, the data point for the average salary was $44,012 per year. Now, the hourly wage rate stayed the same at $21 an hour, but it's interesting to see that slight little decline. And unfortunately, on some level, you can see over here where from a national perspective, the national average salary is at about 57,000. So currently, right now, Florida ranks 50 out of 50 of the states for hospitality jobs nationwide with regards to the salary. So in the last 2 years since I did a presentation similar, we have dropped down 2 additional standing points. But we do have some great salaries that are from a citywide perspective. So from our Miami Beach area or the Adventura area, you could look at closer to an annual salary of $56,000. And you can clearly see our hourly wages are more than what the overall state is in these particular locations. Now, the real question we start thinking about is why does turnover matter? You are welcome to add some turnover stats into the chat or reasons why you think turnover matters to engage. But typically, I think the one piece that we have a tendency to forget is that turnover is going to typically cost a company on average 50% of their salary to actually replace them. So some of the costs that are included there are going to be the advertising and the job postings you're going to leverage, potentially any recruitment agencies, screening those candidates, the time it takes to do so, interviewing, and then hiring. You're going to lose some productivity in that time period. And so what are some of the dangers that we might think about when it comes to high turnover? We're going to lose expertise. If we've invested in that employee to be with them, be with us, we have trained them and they now have a level of expertise that we rely on. When we lose that, we can also then lose some of that sense of productivity if we don't have enough people with that knowledge point. It can simply be expensive. Now, one of the reasons why we might have high turnover, it could be indicative of a poor work-life culture, which of course can have other repercussions, but it can also impact our turnover. And we might have, and it's very common in hospitality, overworked employees and managers because they're covering too many shifts because one of the big pieces is we don't have enough people to do the job. However, on the flip side, we want to think about when turnover is good. And so sometimes we might have employees that are on our team that are just simply too complacent or not engaged with the work. And it's okay that they move on because we want to have the right fit. It might be employees that are struggling to get on board with any new type of expectations we have. Sometimes that bad apple can really ruin the rest of the orchard that you might have. And it is also good when it can bring upon new energy, new workforce, and new ideas. One of the things that I do suggest is that if you don't know what your number is from the past year, you might want to take a look at that and try and set a goal for moving into 2025 for what you want to achieve for your turnover. I also personally, when I was a general manager, I like to look at what was my voluntary turnover and what was my involuntary turnover. Meaning, when did people look to leave on their own? I also try and track those decisions as best I can through exit interviews. And when, on the other end, did we terminate someone because it might have been a good reason for the overall company because the employee was not performing to the best of their ability. Now, when you look at turnover as a ratio in comparison to the rest of the industries that exist, you can clearly see that unfortunately leisure and hospitality does have the highest rate of turnover. And we've seen on average anywhere from 70 to 80%. This obviously jumped up dramatically high during COVID because we still remain as one of the most impacted industries in the return. At one point, we had probably upwards of 130% in terms of our turnover. as of 2023, an interesting stat that I had recently heard that was kind of staggering to me because my passion really lies in hotels as having been a hotel general manager, is that the hotel industry in particular is at a 97.6% turnover rate. And that was a report that was commissioned by the American Hotel Lodging Association by Lightcast. So we want to really start thinking about why we have these components of turnover. Now, as we start to think about where we have people that are leaving, we may have heard of the fact that people are getting into this stage of quiet quitting. And so, roughly, statistics are indicating right now that 1 in 5 people are quitting their job. And so, in the United States, that has equated to a 2.7 increase in people that are actually quitting their job because they're not satisfied. If you are a user of LinkedIn, you're probably seeing that little frame that goes around your profile head that you're open to work. There are roughly about 2.5 million LinkedIn users that are saying that they are open to work experiences. And when we look at employees that are either currently working and looking to leave, or they're looking to avoid a business or consider employment specifically based on things, culture is the number one piece that comes into play, followed by values and benefits. So we're going to get a little bit more into culture in just a minute, but I just want to harp, if you will, on some of that aspect to the quiet quitting. And so, from this aspect, if you're not familiar with that phrase, just to make sure that we're all on the same target, it's where your employees are really starting to become disengaged with what they're doing in their business. And so now they are doing what we consider to be the bare minimum to get by. They're not going beyond the expectations, they're not exceeding expectations. They're basically just punching in, doing what they need to, and heading out. So, United States just trails behind Canada right now in just a selection of just a couple different countries and locations. If we were to look at quiet quitting from a global standpoint in the United States, and this particular image comes back from 2022, you can see here that 2022 indicated that 33% were not in the quiet quitting standpoint, where they were considered in the engaged standpoint, where 67% were non-engaged. What I want to share with you today is that that number for the people that are engaged has actually dropped an additional 10%. We are now only at 23% in the United States for people being truly engaged. So to understand this a little further, that means 1 out of 4 or 5 people are physically and psychologically engaged with their job and potentially could deliver a positive, hopefully long-term contribution to their organization. That's really not a lot of people. And so when we think about that component on a disengagement standpoint, you've got the 23% that are thriving. The bigger piece comes into play that 77 people in your workforce typically are not engaged. We've now started to break that 77% down into 2 different camps. One being the 59% that are loud quitting. These are not engaged. And then you've got the quiet quitting, which are the actively disengaged at 18%. And so this is a huge component that we need to be thinking of. A lot of places that were really thinking about the work environment where your coworkers are more shift survivors than they are your coworkers. You're just trying to get through the actual shift in the day. But we want to try and start to look at that a little bit differently. And just to give you a little perspective, we're not alone. If we lump us into Canada because we are so close, combined together, we have only about 31% that are engaged. If you look closely to Latin America, because they are so close to us, we were right on par in that area. But Europe, as one of the most engaged or least engaged, also has a very not least engaged area. Now, we want to think about how we're bringing people on board. I think this is a really important piece to recruiting the right people. And sometimes this is a challenge, but then when we're bringing them on board, as the little pie chart is indicating, 22% of people are actually going to leave within the first 30 days of employment. That is almost a quarter of the workforce that you're bringing on. So it behooves you to take time to make sure you're doing recruiting in the right way, but also making sure that you're putting a solid plan to onboard your people properly so that you can reduce these potential percentages of losing people. So having training programs that will encourage and give the education and knowledge that is necessary that they need. Provide mentoring opportunities. Identify the team member that you have that does the job really well and does it almost within perfection so that they can try and help guide on a new individual in your team set. You can also provide incentives for that. Um, Help provide as people continue to go beyond the year mark, develop skill sets in new areas so that they can feel comfortable in what they're doing. People want to see that they have a future within the company, and when they can't see that, they're more likely to leave. So, when we think about that level of culture, we want to include a sense of culture that is inclusive because when we have a positive culture in our workforce, you are going to start to see gains in your sales anywhere from 20 to 48% when your team is buying what you're selling, that mission. You can also increase that level of productivity. From an innovation standpoint and being creative that way, when your culture is on board, you are going to see that innovation rise. In general, when you are feeling a great sense of culture within your environment, you're going to have increased ticks in your engagement, that retention, keeping your employees, that they're not leaving, your overall satisfaction, as well as your employee satisfaction. All of that is going to have the opportunity to rise. Now, I mentioned employee retention. And so, from an employee retention standpoint, our goal is to make sure that we retain our employees by making sure that they feel valued and provide them with an opportunity for growth within the business. They're going to feel a boost in morale. You're going to actually reduce your costs because earlier, when I just mentioned that turnover, we're not going to be turning over people. We might have additional costs to keep people, but we're not going to go through that vicious cycle. Another aspect, especially within hospitality, when we retain our people, we have a better sense of customer service because our employees are going to know our guests and are going to be able to recognize our guests and make those guests feel at home. I always find it fascinating. I actually also work at a program and help with FIU. We have a program with Sandals University for the Sandals resorts. And those employees always talk very frequently and fondly about how their guests return on an annual basis. And their longevity, their retention rates are pretty high because those employees have stayed there. And now it makes those guests who want to return feel like they're at home because they're seeing the same people. And in general, it's going to help you reduce your overall costs. When you have employees that consider themselves to be unvalued and not wanting, about 76% of those might start looking for new jobs. So there is a differential, and I just want to make sure that we understand that from a retention, we are trying to retain our people. And while we've got that turnover rate, that is the people that are leaving. Both can be calculated on a set time period. And again, just like your turnover rate, I recommend that you try and identify what is your retention rate. So your turnover rate, you want to be really low, and your retention rate, you want to be really high. And that's going to help you as you plot how many employees you might continue to need throughout your market for your business. Now, how do we continue to be successful? I think the important piece here is we want to be looking at our communication. Communication needs to be a two-way street. We've got to keep these lines of communication open. We've got to understand the needs of our employees and we want to make improvements. And so we might listen to our employees, but we have to remember that we have to be able to provide some form of action. Now, you may not agree with every request or demand that an employee has, but you have to be able to communicate the perspective that you might actually have or why a decision has been made that can be helpful for saying, I listen, I've heard, we might be able to make some tweaks and changes, or this is the logic behind why in which we have done something. Our overall goal when it comes to communication is to make sure that we're demonstrating that we care about our employees and we're showing that they are valued. And we also provide that opportunity to recognize when adjustments need to be made. Maybe we didn't see the entire picture. Maybe we had, I feel like the dog with the party cone on, we had blinders on, and we might not have been able to see beyond that because we were only focused on one thing. Sometimes when we are focused only on the bottom line and that dollar coming into the bank account, sometimes we get short-sighted and we miss some of those things. And so it's really important to open up that line of communication. The other aspect that I always think is important is that we want to make sure that our expectations are clear. Our employees need to know exactly what to expect and where they should stand. So, an open door policy is a really great way to do that, to make sure that issues can be brought forward and collectively tried to be solved together. So when recognition is considered effective, typically we're going to find that those businesses are going to have a reduction or lowered turnover rates. Again, that's good. We want our turnover rates to go lower. They can achieve enhanced business results. And for those managers that are providing recognition, they are seen as more stronger individuals in what we would potentially be considered to be the four basic areas in leadership. And that's going to include good at goal setting, great at communication, providing a sense of trust, and accountability. Now, for those people in a place where they felt morale was considered to be high, 94.4% of their managers were effective at recognition. Now, in contrast, on the flip side, of those same people in the workforce, about 2.4% of people who have low morale in the workplace have said that their employees were good at recognition. And so if you can recognize your employees, and sometimes it's just the post-it note, it's that pat on the back. I used to make sure, now again, I kept my desk near the time clock, one, so I could see who was coming in and out. But more importantly, I kept my desk there so I could welcome my team when they came in, and I could most importantly acknowledge and recognize and thank them for a job well done. When my team had really tough rooms to clean or things were bad, I could acknowledge, hey, Mary, I saw that your room was really bad, or I heard how that guest left it. I know that took an extra special effort for you today. I appreciate that. That small amount made them happy and feel as though they were a part of that 94.4%. Now, about 79% of employees who actually quit their jobs are going to cite a lack of work appreciation for the key reason for leaving. So don't be the reason why people leave because you aren't recognizing people. I think the other piece is that I've also learned in my career, ask what would make them feel good in their form of recognition. Understand if they are okay with public praise or if they prefer something behind the scenes or more quietly, and what it is that they're looking for. I think my biggest mistake when I started as a manager 20 something years ago, is I had ideas in my head as to what I would appreciate as a form of recognition or a reward to go with that recognition for great work. What I failed to do was to ask my employees what did they want. And so I was like, great, we're going to give gift certificates to the restaurants nearby and we'll give them movie theater tickets. Back probably when going to the movies was real cool. That's why I said it was a long time ago. Um, and I never asked my housekeeping department what they wanted. They just wanted grocery store gift cards, and turkeys at Thanksgiving and at Christmas. And so that's where I say engage in that conversation. Understand whether it's a conversation you have, if it's a part of a survey, even if it's an informal question, start to build what that is so that you can be a little bit more personalized with that recognition. So, the workplace of the future, what is it that you can do? And this is where we want to start to really think creatively about what you can do. And I know you're going to be like, Suzanne, we have a business that requires everybody to be there. And while we do, we can still be creative. And so, is it modified hours? Is there a way to think about how you can take something traditionally and be creative with that? Is it different hours? I know in hotels we used to do 7 to 3, 3 to 11, and 11 to 7. Well, does that quite work anymore? Can we adjust those hours? Can we do split shifts? What will work? I always like to try and include working mothers' hours into my days long before it became kind of cool, or to split opportunities with folks so that we could be a little bit different and accomplish the needs that we needed. Now, a work from home or a work from anywhere mentality. Now, this may or may not work for you. I know, for example, Marriott has traditionally been allowing some of their employees to be able to, essentially, they're calling it more work from anywhere, and then take advantage of using their employee discounts so that they can travel and explore the different properties that they have an opportunity to be a part of and still be effective at what they're doing. I would think about what some of those expectations are, and this is what you have to set clearly in your requirements to when you're doing that. What are the dates? What are the times? What are you expected to do? And thinking about how that can be across the board, the expectation for everyone, even if you have to map it out a little bit differently, there are different positions. Is there a day during the week that you can say, you know what, we're not going to have meetings on this particular day, that it allows you to work and function? Sometimes we do get into that meeting fatigue. So, how can you handle that a little bit differently? Is there opportunities that you can infuse more childcare? We know that those costs are not going down, but is there a way that we can offset that or provide additional opportunities or benefits there? And I think, especially from the pandemic, we have a workforce now that needs to be mindful and has mental health concerns. And so we need to be making sure that we are providing for stress reduction, mental health opportunities, and breaks. And this is really hard sometimes to think about in our industry because we're constantly on the go. But what can we do in the realm of what we're doing for our own business to allocate for that? Is it just being mindful and going for a walk? I used to try and get my team during lunch break, like let's do our lunch, but then let's go walk, and not necessarily walk around the property to look at and pick up debris and doing a walk around, but to just walk and talk more personally, and have those individual conversations. So when we're looking at being creative, I think our focus should be the place you want to work. If you want to work there, your employees are more apt to want to work there, that they want to be there. This might take a little bit of a hit as you're planning and have a little bit more impact on your profits now as you try and put some programs into place. But when you're trying to get back on track and you're trying to refocus where your culture is at, that's going to reduce that turnover. And so you want to be really strategic and mindful about what is the culture you want? What is it going to take to be the place that people want to work? Eventually, when you do that, your profits will eventually continue to skyrocket. So, how can you increase your work-life balance? I know sometimes we all get hinged to the telephone, and that our emails come to our phone, and text messaging. And long before this was an issue, I know when my husband was a chief engineer of hotels, I think my biggest piece that I always tried to get him to remember to train his team on was to understand what were the parameters to pick up the phone and call outside of working hours and when wasn't. Yes, we want to be available, but we don't want to burn out our employees in the meantime. And so making sure that we're providing that training, that it is continuous, and that you're documenting it so that if we're seeing that we have the same problem, that we're being successful on that. We look today at some of the wages, but again, when you can and you can start to build that into your budgets, start looking at making sure that you on your own are making those increases and not necessarily just waiting for the marketplace or for any state or federal mandates to increase numbers. That company culture is so important to keep building it. The other piece is kind of the golden rule, right? Treat others as though you would like to be treated with that level of respect. That will go a long way. Again, when we think about that personalization, what can we do to recognize that good work and being outstanding in their work performance? So we see that as a model and a mentor for others within our business. Another aspect is providing autonomy and decision-making power. The alternative to this is that you're being micromanaged. And I hear far too often that people are not happy in an environment where they are being micromanaged. And so, where can you, as the manager or the owner, give up some of that decision-making power and put it into the hands of your team members that we want to consider to be the subject matter experts at what they're doing? Another aspect for seeing growth, and especially when we look at that onboarding aspect, people need to be able to see and visualize what the future is with your company. So providing those career pathways for them, understanding the opportunities for growth, whether it be in just your one individual location or if you are a business that has multiple opportunities, multiple locations, what can be there. Now, I do include the DEI component, but I like to double down on the sense of being inclusive. Include everybody, and not one particular area. Just don't exclude anyone where you're being completely inclusive. And most importantly, have fun with what you do and enjoy it. I'm always down for wearing my pineapples. If I think you can see part of them, I'll move up a little bit more. There you go. Whether it be in my jewelry or in my clothing, the color of my glasses, the fun that we do, if we have music that's available, really try and think of what are the fun things that you can do. Leaders really need to move forward now so that you can be successful and not waiting for it to happen. It's no surprise that employees state that about 46% of employees find limited opportunities for learning new skills as one of the top reasons why they're bored at their current roles and they're looking for a change. So give them that opportunity, provide those opportunities, build them in. One of the things that I was always really successful at doing was having um, individual one-on-one sessions with my employees. I called them PDPs or personal development plans. I figured out what was it that they wanted, what was the goal that they had. And in my observation and working with them and started to see where were their strengths and where were their weaknesses, help them increase their weaknesses, take those skills and those strengths and go further. And that was a better environment for my employees. It was a better environment for me, and they wanted to stick around. And that's what I absolutely loved. So continue, be creative. Another aspect is recruit differently. If you, and this is where if you're not doing this, I can do a whole separate thing on recruitment, but really think about tracking what you're doing for your recruitment. If you're continuing to get challenges from the sources that you're recruiting in now, you've got to think about it differently and you've got to try that differently to try and locate other candidates for the openings that you've got. You need to be focused with your onboarding experience. It needs to be efficient and it needs to start right from the start. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from other employees or even in a couple places that I've worked in, they just didn't have that first day experience to be embedded. One of the great ones, and there was a location that I had been in, I didn't have my keys yet. I was greeted literally by the public safety officer. They knew that what time I was going to be there. They opened up the door for me to come in. They escorted me to my office and got me situated. And I was like, oh goodness. And that was awesome. My direct supervisor was not there for the day because they had a previous commitment, but they put that in place. And I was like, wow, I wasn't just walking in the door and feeling like lost, like, where do I check in? Having a solid orientation program is also going to be really important. We take for granted we've been there and we know these things. We want to make sure that we've got a program in place. I mentioned a little earlier a mentorship program. Put something formal together. It's important to find the right players on your team that are doing things right and doing things correctly, but help be that guide so that those line level employees, when they're concerned or they've got a question, they can go to their mentor before they get lost in the shuffle and just walk away and leave or quietly quit. Look at what are those wellness offerings that you can incorporate. Maybe you can provide that continuous feedback. A lot more employees are looking for more than just 1 year of feedback, where you have an annual review. Is it something that you can do quarterly? Is it something you can do monthly? Giving that feedback so that there are no surprises. When that recognition comes around, those milestones, focus on those. Now, if you are going to lose people, I recommend that you do exit interviews, but listen what's on those. Listen to those. Hopefully, you're listening beforehand, but sometimes it's hard when you're doing that exit interview to hear something that you're not interested in. We're really good in hospitality about providing those perks. So, what can we do to level up and even enhance some of those perks that we have? What are some of those other incentives that we can offer? Can we provide extra cash for signing up loyalty reward members or increase our sales on certain things? Um, is there any type of best in class technology offerings? Are there tools and apps and programs that are making us more efficient? Here, you're going to continue to see and need to explore the opportunity for generative AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. I got you covered if you're interested. I've got a course coming out in January that's open to the public online. But looking at exploring how do we incorporate those things? Um, is it just holiday parties? I mean, I know this is the season right now, but is there team bonding that you can do? Escape rooms are always something that's fun. Different tasting sessions. I think the Hyatt, I came across one that did a really good job on a good taste series competition where they had their chefs come up with a culinary competition, and looked at changing some of their food menus. And it was a competition, and eventually they saw an increase in all of those people who took part in that competition. That they, I think about 70% of those folks went on to advanced levels in their employment because they started to demonstrate that. Enable good people managers. This is that rotten apple orchard aspect. We know that people don't leave because of a bad job, but they leave because of bad people managing them. And so make sure you've got the right people in the job managing. And if you don't, you've got to work on coaching and counseling and getting them on board. You might have a hit on your turnover, but you want to make sure that those people are going to be right. They've got to align with your values for your culture. And then referral bonuses are always great too. So get your employees involved on the co-creation of the experience. Have focus group opportunities or sit down. Sometimes it's a little bit more convenient for people to engage when there's small groups of people. Alternatively, some people don't like to share in front of other people, and that's where you can do your anonymous surveys. I would just focus on very few questions, be short and sweet, and very quick, so that you can get short amount of information. You may do a culture survey or an engagement survey that can take longer, but more and more companies are leveraging the tools with AI that is out there and being able to get short answers quickly so that you have an opportunity to pivot and adjust quickly and not just wait for that entire year to go by. From that growth development standpoint, there's opportunities for you to invest in them. Again, those skill set opportunities. So if you're looking at putting together an opportunity for tuition reimbursement, great opportunity. Start with any of your local schools that you want to work with, and look at, is it an actual degree or are there certifications or workshops that are available? In our case at Chaplin, we have, as well as FIU, we have executive education on the business side and we have executive education on the hospitality side. But there are companies, for example, Amazon, a full-time employee will allocate $3,000 every year, or $1,500 for a part-time employee. and they set different parameters as to what we'll cover. And you can set those parameters into play. But that is another great way that the employees that you have will continue to learn and garner greater skills, but it'll keep them from being complacent and feeling as though they're disengaged. So as we start to come towards our end, and I'm hoping we've got some questions that will come in the chat. Um, because I feel like we don't have a lot of good ones. I think Brian said you got to hit me up with some good hard questions. But we want to think about how we at FIU can help you continue to bridge that gap. So we offer certification programs. Coming up in January, we'll have an advanced hospitality technology program that focuses on the practical applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning. That's a 10-week program that's available online and it's self-paced. We have a hybrid program that starts February 7th. That is the Chief Happiness Officer. Really good if you want to really consider looking at what you can do to start infusing a more happy focus into the culture of your business. That's going to be 2 days on campus, and then it's going to be 4 days afterwards in a virtual session. We have a variety of other workshops that are available. You can incorporate with your local colleges for networking opportunity. In my program, in my department, I can customize specific training programs. I can either bring you to campus or I can come out to you. Clearly, we can look at focusing your efforts to continue degrees programs. In an undergraduate program in hospitality, we also have an online master's program. There's different opportunities to be involved in different advisory boards. Guest speaking, a lot of our faculty members totally look for guest speaking opportunities. When you provide that exposure and that connection, guess what? Now we're connecting you with young people that are interested in our field, and that starts to develop your networking to recruit those individuals. You might be interested in wanting to host field trips and allow faculty members to take students or our student clubs and activities to you. And so more of your managers can engage. Mentorship opportunities. You can also mentor young folks and again, start to create that opportunity. And there's lots of opportunities where professors put together projects and we like to make those projects real. You can connect that way. So as you're thinking about your tough questions, I gave you lots of different ideas and strategies. So the first question I would like to ask is what strategies are working for you now? You're welcome to put that into the chat so we can see it and we can connect with that. And as you're thinking about those strategies, I want you to think about coming away and writing down before you leave today 3 actions you're going to take before you leave today so that you can start thinking about how you're going to implement them for 2025. It's knocking on our door. All right. I don't see any questions yet,
Yeah,
but
anybody have any questions or any strategies you're working on? Like speak now or forever hold your peace? Okay, I don't see it. It's a quiet bunch. You've given them a lot to process, so they're like processing right now.
yeah, there is. It's a lot.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be those strategies. You can ask me other questions too.
I would say, Suzanne, you mentioned about some of the trends and some of like the innovations and AI and things like that. Is there anything that you're hearing in terms of 2025? Any kind of like big trends or anything that's um, that folks are kind of focused on in terms of the industry or in terms of particular businesses?
I think the trend that has to go with it is really, and this is the harder one to get, but it's basically think about it this way. Almost all of your businesses are dealing with credit cards, and you've had to go through the PCI compliance and making sure data is protected and secure. And I think that's the big piece when it comes to AI and making sure you understand how are you using those tools and not impacting or exposing any of your data in what it is that you're sharing that way.
Mhm.
And then quite honestly, I think the big question that truly comes around is, is AI or the robot going to take over my job? And from a hospitality perspective, we're pretty steadfast in saying no, we don't see that as being the case. But what we do see is that these different tools can help make you more productive, take away some of the monotonous tasks that you might be doing, and freeing you up to do more data analysis or a deeper level or tasks that you haven't been able to get to do. And so from that end, those decision makings and that analysis that you can leverage from the different tools. And keep in mind, AI has been around, believe it or not, since the 1950s. It's not new, it's just newer to us because generative AI has come out and people are like, oh, ChatGPT, and we need to use it. And we don't know it and we don't understand it. But we do a lot more on the machine learning end for the strategic decision making and the data analysis that comes around. And how can we leverage using those data sets to get answers that we're looking for?
Mhm. I see Andrea put in the chat, she liked about how you talked about training programs. We have difficulties having our employees train and learn efficiency, so creating a program for them to follow after or during the hiring process will help a lot. I think Suzanne, like onboarding, kind of mentorship, you mentioned some of those things in the presentation.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really, we've gotten away from that. Just, and I think we get away from it in businesses where it's not a focus, and it's like the smoke and mirrors, great. They're alive, we're going to hire them. We've got to work on getting away from that mentality. And then that next component is putting together a structured program. The good thing is when you invest the time to build your orientation program and you have your slide decks or you have your presentations and you have your format, you're just replicating that every time you're bringing on new people. So in the event that you are bringing on new people, is it possible that you can structure them or cluster them together so it's not necessarily a one-on-one orientation? And again, I know many people will say, I need the people right away. They have to start right away. And I get that. I totally do because I've been in the trenches myself. But if you can do it in a more thoughtful way so that you're onboarding them right, then those 22% of people that are leaving in those first 30 days, you're more apt to keep them
Mhm.
if you've got that training program into place. And so that's kind of where I had said that your profits might hit a little bit now as you put some of these plans into place. But if you put those plans into place, if you invest that time now to develop your programs and plot out what you're doing and being thoughtful for it, you will be more successful in the end because you're going to start to see your retention stick around and your turnover is going to be reduced. It's just hard to see in the short run, and I totally get that. I've lived it. I know.
So I don't see any more questions in the chat. So I think we've kind of covered a lot of the topics. Would encourage you guys, she has the QR code up if you'd like to explore some of the executive programs. Also, we will be sending you a copy of the presentation after the webinar. We also will have a recording of the webinar as well that we'll send to you as well. And just want to thank Suzanne for this really great presentation and hospitality and exec ed for that because this has been a really good partnership and we've been getting some really great information to a lot of the small business owners. So, and definitely stay tuned if we can help you in any way from SBDC. All
Awesome.
right.
Thanks for having me. And my email's there. You're welcome to reach out as well. Hope
Mhm.
you all have a great holiday.
Yeah, take care, guys. Have a good week. Have a good holiday.